Hello and welcome to Off My Shelves, and in this episode we're going to have a little bit more of a look at Barry Windsor-Smith's Monsters. So let's get underway. So for those of you who haven't already seen it, I did a quick view of this book. If you want an idea of the size, the scale, the binding, a little bit of a preview of the book, then check out the other video. It's got all that in it, so it's pointless me doing all that again. I'll put a link in the description below. Check that out and then come back or do it afterwards. It's up to you. So we're just going to get into the content a bit more this time. Now, first and foremost, some of the things that I really loved about this book was the artwork. The artwork is consistent and wonderful throughout, really. There's no real let up in the quality of the artwork, really. It is Barry Windsor-Smith at the top of his game. You never see a panel and think that less work has gone into that than any other aspect of the book. It's really a labour of love, like I said in the previous video, for the artwork, very much so. And the other thing is the word balloons and the letterings, which I believe Barry Windsor-Smith did as well. And the positioning of some of the word balloons gives a different type of flow to the dialogue, because there's not much in the way of narration when the book starts. It's very dialogue based, it's very back and forth dialogue, and it flows great because they do something that I haven't really seen in many other comic books or graphic novels. They place the word balloons kind of overlapping into the different panels, and it gives a very interesting flow to the conversation, really. So it gives a speed and a pace to the conversation. Some people might start off and get a little bit confused by it, but you fall into the rhythm of the placement of the speech balloons fairly quickly, and I quite admired that quite a lot, really. When it comes to stories and spoilers, I don't much get into the way of spoilers. I don't try and get into a book in depth before I pick it up. I have a brief look and maybe read a few panels and the overview, but I do try not to spoil it too much. And that's where this book is kind of irritating, because it's not what you would think it would be on the outset. Now, when you read the back, the synopsis on the back, it says that Bobby Bailey is a perfect candidate for a secretive US government experiment, a genetics program that was discovered in Nazi Germany near 20 years before this is set. So this is set in the 60s, and Bailey's only ally is Sergeant McFarland, and this sets off a chain of events, really. Now, nothing really there gets across what this book is. And what this book is first and foremost, it is a story about Bobby Bailey walking into a recruitment office and getting dragged into that secret US government project that was a Nazi project back in the day to create super soldiers and superhumans in some way. And so when the story starts, you get a quick flashback to Bobby Bailey as a child being abused by what you find out quite early on by his father, and it does say quite early on the Bailey home in 1949, and then it shows a man beating his boy, woman coming in, and the story then goes somewhere else. And this story does that a lot. It very much flashes back and forward quite often. That it's always kind of giving you a bit of a story and then either going back to tell you something about that story to reveal it in more depth, or then going forward to see the culmination of that story. And it's really all over the place time frame wise in this kind of 20-year period between the end of the war and just a bit before, and then Bobby Bailey's experiments in the 60s, really, in 1964. And so Bobby Bailey gets signed up for this experiment, and this early part is the most Bobby Bailey talks in the entire book, really. What the synopsis of the book should be, really, is this book is about the total and utter destruction of an innocent boy, physically and mentally, because that's what it is. It is purely and simply about tearing apart Bobby Bailey from top to bottom, inside and out, every way you can imagine, really. And you start off reading it and it gives you a false sense of what the story is by giving you this idea that it's all about this kind of almost like a Weapon X program. It's very reminiscent of Weapon X, actually. It's got, you know, all the tropes of this doctor, this mysterious doctor that happens to be a Nazi doctor with one hand, who we'll come back to in a bit, and you get all these tropes like the bubbling kind of, you know, areas where Bobby Bailey is being processed and turned into something else, and all of that starts off really right from the get-go. Bobby Bailey kind of signs up, goes for Project Prometheus and starts his transformation straight away. During his transformation, the recruitment officer, Sergeant McFarland, Elias McFarland, feels the instant guilt of what he's done. He put Bailey forward to be part of this project, and now he's hearing more and more what this project is about and what it does to people, and he's guilt-stricken really. And so the whole part of this early part of the story is very much a story of Sergeant McFarlane dealing with that guilt, dealing with all of those issues and trying to overcome them, to try and do something to help Bobby Bailey out of his predicament really. Also, Sergeant McFarlane has psychic abilities, and he calls them second sight, so he can see the future and he can communicate with people in different ways and see different things. The whole part of the first part of the story is very science fiction based, very supernatural based. It's all about Nazi experiments and all about Sergeant McFarlane's second sight and him trying his best to do something to relieve his guilt and to help Bobby Bailey out before it's too late really. The bulk of the book, which is this middle section, and it's very much a story in 3 parts really, and the middle section of the book is all about Bobby and his growing up in the 40s, his father coming back from World War II damaged beyond belief, and his mother then struggling to cope with it. You get it all from the mother's perspective, pretty much, from very lengthy diary entries and getting it all from her perspective, and it's jumping back and forth between different years in the 40s, showing you more and more layers of this family tearing itself apart really, and the father constantly beating and constantly mercilessly ripping apart Bobby Bailey as a child, and then the mother doing very little in the way to defend her son and hiding what her husband is doing. And so it's very much showing you a totally different type of graphic novel and a totally different narrative really, even though Bobby Bailey is a character in there and there's lots of characters that are outlaid in the front of the novel in it. The science fiction and kind of almost fantastical element of it that was started off in the first part with the supernatural kind of elements and the creating a monster in tanks and Nazi experiments, all that goes away and it's replaced by a story of long domestic abuse, and it is incredibly hard to get through and incredibly kind of heart-wrenching really, because Bobby Bailey hasn't really got a voice in this story at all. He's very much an innocent that is put upon and tortured and beaten, and you never really get it from his point of view. You see it from his mother's, you see some of it from his father's, but all you see from him is the tail end of all of this constant abuse, and no one ever quite saving him or rescuing him. The domestic abuse section is difficult to read, but it is well done, it is well written, it is well paced, and it is part of life and society. Do you know what I mean? Domestic abuse happens all the time. But the last section of the book, this is the point where, for me, the book absolutely kind of really falls apart in many ways. And so in this final section, for instance, you see cannibalism, you see soldiers being raped, you see people just in the most horrendous situations being abused and killed and mutilated, and it was just too much really. After the domestic kind of abuse section, which was really intense, to follow it by even more intensity was needless. And to make monsters out of these characters even more so was needless as well, because they were already monsters. The Nazi officer that started Project Prometheus, who was back in the start, you see him coming back in this flashback to Project Prometheus, which is what the last section is. But it shows all manner of different deplorable things that this guy is doing, and you didn't need to make him more of a monster. You were already there, pushing it further only so to just almost make it ridiculous in some ways, because I was going through it and I was literally going, this is just silly now, because they were doing more and more outlandish things to be more and more monstrous. But when you get to the end, you realise that it's not a book that you could ever really enjoy. It's a book that you go through and experience, and you either come out on the other end, if you get to the end, you come out kind of debating what was intended and what was meant by it, or you don't want to speak about it ever again. It's kind of up to you. But certainly the art is the biggest draw, and that holds true, and the story in places is very good, but overall not for me really. But I'm sure there are many people out there that will get something from it in some way. And yeah, and I will leave it there. So thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.